Welcome to the Rude Dog Show. This is Rudy Reyes. Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for joining me. I am your host. Wherever you go, whatever you do, download the WBLC Sports app. It's free. You can find it from Google. You can find it on iTunes as well. Please join me for an entire hour of sports goodness. We're talking about OTAs today. Now, getting that out of the way, perhaps Monday I can get Sinbad back on the show. I know he had flown out here to Los Angeles. He had some shows that he had to do, but hopefully be able to get him on the show. So idealistically, that's what is going to happen. As you probably all are aware, and I'm live on Facebook right now, so please interact with me. If you can't find the app, go to therudogshow.com. Go to the front of the page and click on whatever works for you, whether you have an Android or an Apple device. So the NFL is on its way. We're starting off with OTAs. I'm a poet and didn't know it. Not really. I think a lot of the players in the NFL that have been drafted are also looking at making their own poetry on the field. And of course, a wheelhouse that I'm very familiar with is indeed Steelers OTAs, which started just a couple of days ago. Actually, a few days ago. Day 3 is today. And rest assured, fans, if you're looking for action, it's not going to happen till the end of July, at least for Steelers training camp in Latrobe at St. Vincent College. Now, I've been there. Make sure you bring everything you need because it's going to be a sticky situation unless you do. As training camp does approach nationwide, however, the roadblock that is OTA stands in the way of all of that fun, all that goodness, all the ability for you to enjoy seeing your favorite player or players on the field. And if you're at St. Vincent, you'll get an eyeful from no matter what perspective you're at. And make sure you get there early. There are a lot of fans who arrive there. You can almost get trampled on at the net if you're not careful. And there are nets and netting all over the place. So make sure you get there early. But right now we're talking OTAs. Indeed, the shorts and shirts are in full force. So make no mistake, we're going to talk about everything else other than shirts and shorts here on the show today. And, of course, in the second half of the show, we're going to talk some Redskins, what they're doing out in D.C. with Dujunnea Bland, who covers the Redskins on Redskins Wire. He'll join me in the second half of the show, talking about everything that is the Redskins, the OTAs, who's in, who's out, who hasn't showed up, and who he plans on seeing, as you would suspect, in organized team activities that are the OTAs. Most people start in the OTAs, or at least you would think there are some ways to connect. You connect with other players, you connect with the atmosphere, you connect with your coaches, you're able to build the bond, build the familiarity, understand everybody's personality, their attitude, their approach, and basically who they are and what they're able to contribute while on the football field as well as being on the sidelines. It kind of reminds me there were certain players that were picked up in free agency last year, didn't quite work out. You should already know who that is. And Ladarius Green, certainly he did fit the mold of a Steelers tight end. The problem is that there were possibly unreported concussions that he had not made to NFL staff, coaches, and the NFL overall, which could have ultimately affected his ability to stay on the field in more of a consistent manner. Now, don't forget, in 2014, Steelers did pick up a cat by the name of Dree Archer. And what's interesting about Dree Archer, he was one of the fastest guys at the combine. He made his presence known there, one of the fastest 40s that you'll find in any recent given NFL combine. But it didn't translate into the NFL, at least not for the Steelers. I'd mentioned this a few times on the show, that he has not been playing. He may not be playing. He may not even be suiting up at all in the NFL because he felt as though the pick, and I wish I had him on the show. And by the way, you can interact 216-539-9967. That's the number to call in. So don't forget that. Feel free to interact, ask me some questions, and we'll get right down to the heart of the matter. Now, when I had interviewed Dre Archer, I thought to myself, man, this guy's fast. He's going to be good. He's going to be solid on punt returns. He's going to have the type of attitude and mentality that any guy who gets drafted out of an A1 school, a Division I school, will have. The attitude, the personality, the happiness to be there. I can't speak for him, but I can tell you that if I was given the opportunity and I was put in that situation to try to shine, to try to make my impact known, I would have certainly did everything I could to make that a reality. Unfortunately, I think it was a bad pick by the Steelers, and his attitude and mentality was of, and again, I can't speak for him, but if he's not playing the NFL, he got drafted by a team where he's essentially got, he was released, first year player released. To me, that affects my mentality, my attitude, my decision-making process to be either a negative or positive. Negative in that maybe I don't want to play anymore. Maybe I'm good. I did everything I could while I was in college. It didn't quite work out in the NFL. And then the other side of the attitude is, well, maybe it just wasn't my calling to be with the Steelers. And I don't think there's enough conversation in regards to NFL teams in general picking guys that doesn't exactly work for their mold. They may look great in the combine. They may have a great interview while they were there. They had them in the booth. They discussed things about their backdrop, their life, and everything that has to do with who they are as a person, and giving them situations where they can run into them and be able to diagnose and find out and articulate to a point where they can give them, positive answers, honest answers. And I think that that's something in regards to scouting. What they don't do enough of is to get more of a defining moment in relation to where these kids' mindsets actually are. Where do they belong? Where are they? Is their mind in the game? Is their body in the game? Is their attitude in the game? I think a lot of that is missed. It's missed. And I think in Dre Archer's instance, it certainly is. But outside of that, outside of the negative draft picks, the guys that are there, the guys that are doing the work, putting the time in, will there be a new contract with Alejandro Villanueva? Nobody knows. I would suspect there would be something to get done. You could have a conversation, say that perhaps Gerald Hawkins would be a fitting guy to take position on the offensive side in his place, just in case he can't get a long-term deal done. Maybe. It's a big maybe. It's possible. It's plausible. I can see it, but then again, I don't make those decisions. I'll leave that to the team that knows better than I do. Now, I know you're probably wondering, who did the Steelers, grab? Who did they target? Who did they look for? Who did they sign? Of course, everybody knows about that Landry Jones deal as part of being a free agent, and what kind of money they shelved out for him in a 2-year deal, $2,200,000, and then David Johnson, $1,017,500, which is a very interesting number to say the least. It wasn't rounded like Landry Jones' numbers were. And right now in free agency, the Steelers started out with about a whopping $21.1 million. So there's a lot of bread to spread out, and I think the Steelers would do it effectively. They've never been big in free agency, but they also realize that they've had a method in use for a very long time that works for some free agents, but it doesn't work for others. Darius Green is a good example of that. A guy who came in expected to be the heir apparent to Heath Miller. I mentioned this on the show a few days ago. It didn't quite work out that way. Did not pan out that way. Why? Because he could not stay on the field long enough. It was a good decision to cut him. I'm not quite sure if they're on the hook. I had inquired with Dale Lawley, who covers the Steelers there in Pittsburgh, about coming onto the show, but I haven't heard back from him yet. So hopefully he'll call in and be giving me an earful in regards to what's going on at Steelers training camp. I don't know that I like the Landry Jones signing if we want to break that down a little bit further. Why? Because he's a backup quarterback. He's a backup guy. He's a backup guy. Did he receive backup money? Yes, he received backup money, and that's all he's going to get. He's not the answer in Pittsburgh. He's not the answer in the backup position. That's why I believe when I say heir apparent, I don't mean that as the end all, as if that's exactly who they're going with. So there's no way to misconstrue my point here, which is if Josh Dobbs can prove himself in OTs, prove himself in training camp, he has the ability to send Landry Jones packing and not the true backup to possibly practice squad, but that's all based on his action, based on what he does and how he does it. Do I like the signing of David Johnson? Yes, I absolutely do. Another weapon in your arsenal to get things done. And on the offensive side of the ball is certainly someone that you can look for. So when you think about other free agent acquisitions, and the Steelers don't make a ton of them. It's not as if they're pulling in a free agent frenzy mode and the Steelers are going to acquire 6, 7, 8 free agents. It doesn't happen that way. It doesn't happen that way. 2 or 3. Okay, Alu from the Jaguars is 1. Justin Hunter, a guy who came in to the league in 2014, will now compete. And I believe he will compete. 6'4", 200? Yeah, he will compete with the likes of Martavis Bryant. We already know the past on that. We'll talk about that in the latter part of the show. As well as Sammy Coates, who battled injuries, a variety of injuries that occurred last year, which hampered him from being the explosive player that the Steelers thought he may turn into, may translate into a guy who can catch the ball. He almost reminds me of Darius Hayward-Bay when he played for the Oakland Raiders, now plays for the Steelers. Darius Hayward-Bay had hands of blocks. He couldn't catch anything. Every once in a while, he'll show brilliance down the field, receiving balls from a car. I mean, but other than that, he didn't really do a whole lot. He was a splashy player at times in Oakland, but now with the Steelers, it's kind of the utility wide receiver, almost the slot guy, if you will. Am I a true fan of Darius Hayward-Bay? No, not really. I mean, his production was good, but at times when he could have grabbed the ball, pulled it out of the air, pulled it inside, see where my hand is? Pull inside and get it done. It's just missed out on those opportunities at times. At times. I do have an interview that's posted going back to wide receivers is saying in that exact market. And by the way, I believe Justin Hunter is there for good in lieu of one of these guys showing up in a very, very big way. But Martavis Bryant was interviewed by Dale Lawley, and apparently he added 10 pounds of muscle during his suspension process in Nevada at a Nevada high school, actually in Vegas High School. He last played at 215. He's up at 225. May is a time for weight updates, but this one carries more weight, literally, because it shows Bryant's diligent while away from the team, as well as the added mass. Bryant said the suspension as the birth of his son helped him make him a different person, and he has had to put the right people around him to succeed. Now, when he entered the league, he's young, right out of college. I think he was 22 years old, and found himself hanging around with the wrong people. And I've mentioned this before. I'm going to mention it again, that you have guys in the NFL who find themselves hampered because of the choice of people they choose to have around them, the element of people they choose to have around them. Welcome to the Rude Dog Show. This is Rudy Reyes.
Good afternoon, Rudy. It's Lou.
Lou!
Yeah.
We're talking Steelers OTAs, and we were talking about Martavis Bryant, the fact that he's back, and the fact that his ability to make, and I know I'm not going to dwell on the past a whole lot, but the fact is what it is, he committed a myriad of issues for himself by testing positive for marijuana, and It's not something that's accepted by the NFL, nor should it be accepted by the NFL. Is the NFL going to lighten the load, if you will? You see what they did with the touchdown celebration. We had that discussion yesterday. Do you think
touchdown celebration is one thing, but marijuana is another? I mean, that has no place in football or any sport for that matter. I mean, if you call it, you should pay. You should pay the penalty, no matter how severe it is.
I think that when you look at the severity of, and of course, every single crime deserves its own punishment, regardless of what it is, regardless who does it. It doesn't matter if you're a high-profile athlete or if you're, someone who blames the world's problems on your own shoulders. So clearly, you have to understand, recognize where you went wrong, make the changes, and that's exactly what Martavis Bryant has done. Do you believe he has the right people around him now to help him succeed? Do you believe that a tighter circle of people you choose to have in your life, and I'm putting myself in a very high spotlight role. Not only are you with one of the best organizations in football, the Steelers, but you're also a very sought after wide receiver in the draft out of Clemson. Do you believe that he is solidified a better group of people to be around, or do you think that he minimized the negativities and the lack of supported people around him?
Well, he minimized it. I mean, he chose to hang out with these group of people, and they gave him the marijuana stuff. It's the wrong kind of people that you hang around. You need to be around people who are going to motivate you and help you more progress as a player in the game. Because if you hang around these people who are just going to screw you up, it's going to kill you in the long run.
Well, I mean, again, this is
really hurt you.
You're right, and this is your choice as a player. It's your choice as a person, your choice as an adult to make the right decision to say, you know what, this person is of bad nature. This isn't the kind of person or people that I want in my life. And what's even more interesting is that apparently he did recognize. As a matter of fact, Jeremy Fowler, who covers the Steelers explicitly, that he was suspended all of 2016, but there's no denying he belongs in the starting lineup, quote, end quote. He proves trustworthy that Bryant will have to hold off Juju Smith-Schuster and Sammy Coates, but clearly the most talented of the three. Now, that's it. That's an interesting comment. Of course, I don't have Jeremy Fowler calling in, but I will say this. Juju Smith-Schuster's only 20 years old, okay? Does he have a big contract now? Yes. Is it with the Steelers? Yes. Will he fulfill those prerequisites that were designated to him by the organization? That remains to be seen. I would suspect that he did. I would suspect that he did, or that he will. Why? Because he was one of the best wide receivers that USC had. One of the best. And I think that because of his age. Now, look, I'm going to be honest with you. When women say that they're more mature than men, 90% of the time they're right. Because they are. Whereas when a guy says, oh, I'm mature enough, I can handle this, I can handle that. But when the rubber meets the road, can they really? I guess actions speak louder than words, and he's 20 years old. So is he mature enough to be able to handle the monetary exchange? What is your take on that?
That he made a mistake, and now he's got to pay for it. He doesn't know he didn't know what he was doing. And most young men don't really know what they're doing. They think they got it made, they think they can handle this and everything. And then they go out and do the wrong things, and it lashes them up, and it could hurt them down the road later.
Well, it does. It certainly does. And moreover, when I look at Martavis Bryant, his ability to bounce back from it will be the proof in the pudding, so to speak, this year for the Steelers. Will his ability to break the game wide open be on display every single down in every single game? That remains to be seen. I would suspect that he has. Children have a way of maturing you as a parent, but it doesn't always work. So let me end with that statement right there. I want to give give a shout out to SeatGiant.com. Or if you want the experience, not just a piece of paper, not just tickets, not just saying, oh, you know, I clicked on something and now it takes me to something else. No, SeatGiant.com can give you the experience you're looking for. Only at SeatGiant.com can you find it. I'm going to give a grade level to the Steelers. Why? Because I feel that I need to. TJ Watt, opposite of JJ Watt, as far as pass rushing, something that the Steelers have been looking for quite some time, a pure and elite pass rusher. That's TJ Watt. Does he remind me of his brother JJ Watt? A little bit, because, well, they are related. They have similar mechanics. So it's going to be interesting on Christmas Day to see how these guys go head to head, how many sacks, how many pressures, how many interception returns, balls batted down, and all the goodness that comes with being a pass rusher is exhibited by TJ Watt versus his brother on the other side of the defensive line for the Houston Texans. But the Steelers, Kevin King, Reuben Foster, I'm impressed with those picks. And clearly the ones that did not pick out, at least for me, in my opinion, I had a chance to meet Jarvis Jones. I interviewed Jarvis. They were expecting more from him. It didn't come to fruition. But I wish Jarvis the best. Now he lands in Arizona with the Cardinals and under Larry Foote. Ryan Shazier, clearly an elite defensive guy. Bud Dupree coming into his own. And then you have T.J. Watt that will line up right with that Steelers front seven. He brings so much. He brings the elite pass rush. He brings the mentality. And you couldn't get any better for that with 11-inch hands and 33-inch arms. And there's just no way. The guy he's a beast. He's a beast in the making. I can't wait to see him at training camp, see how that actually pans out. And then Juju Smith-Schuster, the aforementioned wide receiver at USC, will receive balls from Ben Roethlisberger, and I like that. I like that you have more weaponry. I mean, what quarterback does not want enough weaponry to go around, to make the scores, to be the elite guy on the outside corner or be the guy in the inside slot? Juju Smith-Schuster certainly fits that even at 20 years old. He has the mentality. He has the player-making capability. And once more, he has the passion to commit himself on the field. But again, it's words. It was action at USC, but that's an NCAA level. It's not an NFL level, so don't get those two confused. Don't do it. Just don't do it. Don't do it. Because once you get wrapped up in, oh, well, he did this in college and he did that in college, that's great. Did he do it in the NFL? Well, no, not really. I hate to use quarterbacks as a marker. And of course, Larry weighs in ability to succeed in the NFL. He's a D3 for Ben and Brown on opposite corner, which I agree. You'd have to play man, but the problem is that AB is too fast. He's too quick on the inside. He's got great cuts. He knows how to run slant routes like no other. Juju Smith-Schuster being tall, he's wide, 6'2". He can jump up and basically bash off defenders and end up turning into a 50-50. When you look at that, whether he comes down with it or not, I think he gets the opportunities in Pittsburgh to be the possible number 2, maybe even number 3 wide receiver now that Marcus Wheaton is gone and on with the Chicago Bears. Eli Rogers could be the inevitable slant guy on the inside route that would enable a fast, quick, slant to get a first down. I think there's way too much power here on the Steelers offensive line. And for Ben Roethlisberger, as long as he puts it where he's supposed to and on a timely manner, I think you're going to get a lot more out of on a per attempt or maybe even yards after catch, or as those people know, it's yak. Sammy Coates could be replaced by Smith-Schuster depending on if he runs it up. I mean, if he works, if he plays, if he grinds, if he does what he's supposed to, then yes, certainly. And then you had a guy like Cameron Sutton, quarterback out of Tennessee, that they wanted to do a lot more man. He's got deep creative knowledge that gives him a better opportunity to play in that Steelers backfield. He's going to be a guy that's going to cover in the slot. I would like to see him in the nickel. He played that at Tennessee, And in all fairness, he's got a 4.52 and a 40, so that means he's fast, he's quick. He has the physicality and the ability and the agility to really do wonders on would-be catches by wide receivers. But I like his physicality. I like how he's thick. He's stout and extremely physical at the point of contact. So I really look for him to make a difference with this Steelers secondary. And of course, switching the other side, you got to go to James Conner. Got to give it up to him. It's a feel-good story for him and Pitt University, as well as James Conner himself gets to stay home and play in the same field at Heinz Field he played with while he was in Pittsburgh. Once in Pittsburgh, staying in Pittsburgh as a cancer survivor, 6'2", 240 guy that almost reminds me of a Christian McCaffrey, only from a size aspect, but he's a bruiser, he's a grinder. This guy's going to get you a lot of yards, whether it's in the backfield or you put him out in the slot and use him like they did last year with Le'Veon Bell. So I like that. I like the way it looks. It's just going to be a solid fit. And of course, you grab Josh Dobbs, who also compete, another guy out of Tennessee. Apparently Steelers like to travel to Tennessee and make the pickings count when they have to, especially in Tennessee. Go Vols. And I already had this conversation about Dobbs. I'm not going to really go into all of that, but I will say this. Leonard Jones has not turned into the type of quarterback that the Steelers have been looking for, and I think Josh Dobbs could very well fit that mold. Brian Allen, cornerback out of Utah, out of the Utes, and of course they grab a guy, Jason Fanaika, who I had on the show, in fact, on the Rude Dog show about 3 weeks ago. We were talking about his arrival there after being basically passed around in the NFL by the 49ers and the Raiders and the Redskins, but he finds himself with the Steelers. Maybe he makes a name for himself in the up front along with Alu. That remains to be seen, but I'd like to think that Fanaika finds a home, and that's in Pittsburgh. But Brian Allen has a 4.48 and a 40. He's got a tall vertical of 35 foot, 34-inch arms. I mean, the guy is an all-around beast player with the type of mentality, and I think that Carnell Lake will love this guy. He's a purebred talent out of a system that Carnell Lake would love to bring him in and get him up to speed. Speaking of speed, he's really, really fast. But hey, Lou, gotta go. Thank you for the call, though. I appreciate it.
My pleasure.
Thanks, man. Take care. Welcome to the Rude Dog Show. This is Rudy Reyes.
How's it going? You stay bland here.
Dujunnea, hey, man. How are you? Thanks for calling in the show.
Doing great, man. Doing great.
Good. Glad to hear it. You know, I need to take a quick break. Anyway, welcome, ladies and gentlemen. Dujunnea Bland is at NotBland21 on Twitter. He covers the Redskins at Redskins Wire and does some other fantastic things. I need to go to a quick commercial break, but I will be right back, I promise. So stay tuned. Kick up your feet, grab some more popcorns. We're going to come back and talk about some Redskins OTAs, what they're doing, who's there, who's not there, who they are thinking they're lucky stars that they are there. Anyway, we will be right back. This is Rudy Reyes on the Rude Dog Show on WBLZSports.com. I'm trying to get a demo. Trying to get it here. Let's see. What do we have? Welcome back to the Rude Dog Show. This is Rudy Reyes. Anyway, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for joining me in the other half of this. Make sure you have downloaded the WBLZ Sports app on iTunes or at the Google Play Store. Anyway, I'm your host, Rudy Reyes. I am here on the Rude Dog Show for another 30 minutes or so. But welcome a familiar guest to the show, at least on one other occasion. Welcome, Dujunnea Bland, who covers the Washington Redskins at Redskins Wire. Go shoot him a follow. He's a great guy if you want to know about Redskins football, OTAs, and everything else. Anyway, welcome back to the show. How are you, Dujunnea?
I'm doing great, man. Thanks for having me back.
Yeah, no problem at all. It's my pleasure. Look, we're talking about the Redskins here in the second half. If you are not tuned in, I'm here on Facebook Live as well as the WBLZ Sports app. But the welcoming back of Josh Doctson was something that, because he was sidelined for 14 games last year, something that fans really wanted to see take shape this year. He had an Achilles injury, and obviously now it's a post-mortem. I mean, it's not something that he's even considered as being a part of his game moving forward. What are your thoughts on Josh Doctson's return, and can he be the guy that the Redskins are looking for? Granted, they picked him up in 2016 with a relatively decent contract.
I think he can be very decent for the Redskins. When you looked at the times that he did appear, he can stretch the field, he can get deep, and he can really quickly get behind the defense. And as you mentioned, there's really no sign of that injury, that Achilles injury, giving him any trouble. Even before OTAs and early workout sessions, he looked very good. In earlier OTAs, he has impressed as well out there on the field. And coupling him with Terrell Pryor, and then having the smaller receiver, Jamison Crowder, that's a pretty good set of guys to be throwing the ball to.
Yeah, I think so. Look, he's a TCU guy. Anybody who's not familiar with TCU, they have some fantastic products who know how speed kills, and that's certainly something that was on display in the OTAs. And I think Doctson brings that big time to that receiving core. But we were talking about Kirk Cousins before the NFL draft, and of course, Josh Norman had came in as a free agent to the Washington Redskins, who we had this conversation on a myriad of occasions in regards to, is Josh Norman going to be receiving more help in that backfield because he can't do it by himself, but receiving passes by Kirk Cousins, nonetheless, a guy who's still working on a franchise tag. Did the Redskins get him some help? And if so, will that impact the way that they play, and will you see more interceptions there in D.C.?
I think if you look at the draft this year, they spent 6 or 7 of their 10 picks on the defensive side of the ball. You look at the linebacker picks. You look at the early pick of Jonathan Allen, who, I don't think anybody saw that coming or even would have thought he would have been there for the Redskins to pick. But it's definitely, that was a huge need, a top 5 guy going to them there at 17. Then you have the second round pick in Ryan Anderson. Then you look at the guys that they picked up just in the cornerback position. You look at the Fabian. They have the Nelson pick as well as safety. I think what really helps, though, is the fact that now they have some players up front. If you notice what they did in the draft is have versatile players up front in that front 7. And the fact is you can have some versatile players that pressure can come from anywhere in any side of the defense. And if anybody is, like stats, even though they're a 3-4 defense, they spent 70% of their snaps in the 4-3 defense. So that tells you, what type of personnel they favor and how they think that they can get pressure. But I think you're going to see more interceptions from the secondary because they won't be spending a whole lot of time trying to cover guys. And I think, I think you saw that in the first game with the Steelers. Huge issue when you don't have enough pressure. Guys like, you're having to defend guys like AB. That's very tough one-on-one and against a good quarterback like the Roethlisbergers of the world. Very difficult to cover more than 7 seconds. So I think that's going to be a tremendous increase, being that they can get pressure now from anywhere on the football field.
I like the fact that the Washington Redskins, and they ended up 9-7 last year. We had this conversation earlier on. I believe that look, the NFC East is a tough business, and being 8-7-1 with that alluvious tie for whatever that means, but a tie is a tie. 8-7 is not going to quite get it done in the NFC East. But with the level of talent within that division, where do you see the Washington Redskins actually being this year based on the talent? Granted, they have to put a lot of these working pieces together, working guys into the rotation, whether you're talking in the front seven, in the backfield, in the nickel, the dive. Where do you see the Redskins fitting as far as what their record would indicate, and do they make a postseason run with that record?
I think they can. I'm going to call and say that it's going to be a wild card that they get in. Do they have the opportunity to win the division? Absolutely. Their offense was top 5 in the league, and I understand that they lost two 1,000 yard plus 1,000 yard receivers, of course. But they did an excellent job in replacing those guys. I think Terrell Pryor is going to be a guy that really brings and showcases himself for what he could have been there in Cleveland. And then you have Dotson to the mix. You still have Jamison Crowder, and of course, you still have Jordan Reed and Vernon Davis out there as well. And if they can establish more of a running game, I think that's going to be very important for them. And it'll give it some, of course, there's no patience in Washington, D.C., and I think Jay Gruden yesterday alluded to that, they're going to have to get after it and get after it early. The gelling is going to have to start now, and first game of the season, they're going to have to be ready. There can't be any excuses. But, of course, it's going to take time. But I think they can at least make a wild card, and they still have the ability to win a division. You look at Dallas, they lost a few players to other teams on defense, and that was a defense that really wasn't as talented as it showed on the statistics side, but a lot of credit to Ron Marinelli there to get the job done with the talent that he had. You look at the increases over there with Philadelphia and New York, it's going to be a dogfight. I think the East is back to being that dog that it used to be in the 90s. It's going to be very interesting to watch.
I'll be honest with you, looking at the Washington Redskins, looking at what they did last year, and a lot of the key, there were a lot of miscues. There were miscues defensively, there was miscues offensively, and then you had stated there had been some possible 1,000-yard rushers, and position coach Rennie Jordan had worked with these guys yesterday in regards to blocking drills, and of course the arms need to be high and tight, and the hip movement needs to be fluid. And do you think that that's something that they can really get back to, is establishing a run game more so than just being able to throw it outside on the slot?
Well, they have to. And anybody knows Sean McVay. McVay is a pass-first kind of guy. And, the Rams are, when you see the Rams this year, you're going to see that. They're going to really know whether Jared Goff can throw the football, because that's what McVay likes to do. He's a very creative guy, though, very smart, and one of the innovative offensive coordinators, I believe, in the league. But he is a pass-happy guy. I think, and we saw this earlier in the year. I think it was Chris Thompson who made this comment that he feels like this is going to be more of Jay Gruden's offense, and it is very evident with how he's dealt with making sure that Robert Kelly is at a good weight, even though he's not a fat guy. I mean, they call him Fat Rob, but he's not really a fat guy. But they want guys that are going to want the guys to be ready to be able to take the load because they are going to run the ball more. And that was really the Achilles heel last year. Left the defense out to dry a few times, especially when they're weren't as talented in certain areas as they needed to be. and they lost games late because of poor clock management and not running the football.
I think they need to get back to more creativity on the offensive side of the ball, because when you look at Kirk Cousins and the fact that he did not get the contract, and me and you had that discussion as well, that he was really looking for, that some people felt that he deserved and others felt that he shouldn't even be in Washington. And of course, there was a huge issue between you had a lot of front office things that were in shambles. I will say that much, and that's all I'm going to touch on that topic. But there's so much there. I don't even want to get into it. But looking at Matt Jones, Jordan Reed, Trent Williams, guys that were not there, that are currently still not there, are there any words at all that any one of these three guys will be in these OTAs sooner rather than later?
There hasn't been any word. As far as Matt Jones, I think the writing's on the wall for him. You look at what Rob Kelly did last year, a guy that Jay Gruden really likes, Chris Thompson. He's a very versatile back, great blocker, and a good pass catcher out of the backfield. They add P-Run into that mix. Matt Jones had too many fumbles at critical moments. That's something Jay Gruden definitely does not like, and I think they're looking to move him out of DC, and that's why he's not there. And again, I don't worry about too much in early OTAs, especially when it's not mandatory. You know, guys are going to miss. Some of the veterans are going to miss because it is voluntary, and I don't take too much from that. When it's mandatory and you're not there, then you better have a good reason, and then we might want to raise a question or two. But involuntary workouts, nah, I wouldn't worry about it too much.
You know, I was talking about this the beginning of the show. I alluded to the fact that during OTAs, just as a point of reference, that OTAs gives new guys the opportunity. You were talking about gelling. I think there's a lot to be considered when you're new. You almost have to be there. I mean, I've never heard of a rookie guy who made it to rookie minicamp getting signed to a roster spot to some degree being absent from OTAs. They need to meld. They need to work together. And I think that needs to start a lot earlier. And I think the NFLPA and the NFL would be better suited if they took the word of non-mandatory out of the conversation and making it actually mandatory. What are your thoughts on that actually coming to fruition? And if so, do you see better gameplays or more fluidity? And since we're talking about the Redskins, does Kirk Cousins hook up to who he needs to in order to be that much more effective during the regular season?
Yeah, I think you have a good point there. Especially for the rookies, this is their time to start gelling with their veteran teammates. They're behind the eight ball, and they have to learn pretty quickly before training camp gets in. And I think you're right. You start sooner and not having this voluntary, you can come, you don't have to come type of thing. You look at Kirk Cousins just from the quarterback standpoint. He was throwing to guys that were under 6 feet. Now he's having, I think it's out of the 10 receivers that are there, there's only 2 guys that are under 6 feet, and that is Jamison Crowder, and I believe it is guy's name eludes me, but those guys are only 2. Now he's throwing to he's throwing to towers out there 6 foot and above. So you think you have to. It's a little bit different trajectory. Your pass catching radius is different now because guys can, because they're taller, they can get up and get the ball, snatch it out of the air. They have a little bit more, catch radius than the smaller guys. So it changes the way he throws the ball and where he wants to put it as well. So yeah, absolutely. I think it has to change. And if it does change, then yeah, you see a lot better play and a lot more fluidity during the preseason games and during the regular season. Of course, preseason is a little different. You have a mixture of guys, but still, if we got that process started early, again, they're not in pads or anything like that, so it's not like you're going to worry about injuries and things of that nature. It's not very little hitting going on. So yeah, you start early, you get in a fluid role, and then by the time preseason, regular season comes around, guys are up to speed, and the play is a lot better.
Plays a lot better, the attitude and the connectivity. And I don't mean that literally, I mean figuratively, because look, this is a long season. It starts in OTAs, it works through training camp, regular season. If your team's good enough, they'll get into the postseason. But every single game, all your bus trips, all the time, sharing a room with somebody else, whether they're a rookie or not, I think that once you take the word non-mandatory out of the equation, puts ownership in those guys. I mean, I can't even imagine how many non-mandatory ones, mandatory OTAs that guys will actually attend because they want to be there. They understand. Guys like Heath Miller, and when I interviewed him in 2014, he told me the very same thing. He said, look, he says, they're just trying to improve. They're just trying to get better. And that is, in all fairness, what a rookie does. How would he know that unless he's there? I mean, it's general, yes, but when you look at the reality of it, I think that it would serve and prove to be much better in the NFL, especially for those teams. And of course, everybody has mandatory OTAs. It's an NFLPA and part of CBA and such. But in all fairness, I think it would prove a lot better and more significant type of play. And you're right. Preseason is really, really, really vanilla. I mean, I know you fans of vanilla out there will like that, but, I think something can be said for those teams that really want to get past the vanilla type preseason and get into the meat and potatoes. I think it starts in the OTA, and the minute you make it mandatory, you put the ownership back on each individual player, over 2,000 current players in the NFL in any given year. You were talking about Terrell Pryor earlier and the fact that he's a welcomed addition to the Redskins, something that I didn't, at times I seen him, of course, you know, the Steelers play Cleveland Browns twice a year, Ravens twice a year, you know, that's just how division conference, things work. But when you look at Terrell Pryor, the fact that he's 6'4", former quarterback, do you foresee any type of wildcat, you know, action, anything that would suggest that because Terrell Pryor has that type of athleticism and the background, that Terrell Pryor Sr. can be somewhat of an option quarterback run?
I think I don't know if there's like anything definite, but I think you can see a wrinkle or two in there. And he even alluded to that yesterday about his ability, coming from a quarterback background, that the receivers expect a little bit more from him because you know, it's one thing to be a receiver, and it's another thing to go from quarterback to receiver. You see things a little bit differently and kind of understand things a little bit differently because as a quarterback, you know, you have to know everybody's position and where they're supposed to be, understand what they're doing in certain plays. And so he has a little bit extra insight and understands where he needs to be on top of where he thinks his quarterback expects him to be. So I think that in itself is a given you know, nuance that can be spread to all the other guys on the wide receiver core. But to get back to him, you know, possibly being quarterback, yeah, I think you could see some trickery in there too. I don't think it would be much, but of course, you know, any little wrinkle and thing that you can take advantage of when it comes to the talent on your football team to try to get a win, especially late in the season, it's a plus. So yeah, he definitely brings that to the Redskins. And it's a guy who can actually throw the ball, not a guy who you hope can at least get it out there and that wobbly duck makes it to said receiver.
Right. Exactly right. No. And I see that as well. A lot of times teams that have that type of talent on their roster would see a given opportunity, and it would not surprise me at all to see Jay Gruden go for it, especially if it's a third and short, you know, situation. But let's switch to defense and then the show. Well, I don't have another hour. I wish I did. But when you look at guys who were injured defensively, and I think that's one of the reasons why other teams were pass happy on them being able to run through me. Fabian Moreau, who was out, Monty Nicholson, and D'Angelo Hall, of course, all these guys were recovering from injury last season, which takes a toll on other guys who otherwise would have played in those respective positions unfamiliar. Do you see that them coming back means that they'll have more success on the pass rush? I didn't see a whole lot of blitzing for the Redskins, and if they did, they basically it was some imagery going on there. But do the Redskins get back to basics and perform a solid pass rush that makes them more formidable against the NFC East teams collectively?
I think so, and you said something right there, and the fact that injuries were a huge problem, and the depth was not there for this football team, especially in the front seven. Will Compton play out of position last year? That's not his MO. That's not what he does best. Even though he did record second most tackles on the team, 106 tackles, right behind his teammate Mason Foster, who had 124. But you had Zach Brown in there. You got the Ryan Andersons of the world. There's a couple guys, hybrid guys. They did sign the unrestricted free agent and Chris Carter. You got Josh Harvey Clemens, who I think is probably a long shot. But you have Nico Marley that they brought in, undrafted free agent. But if you look up front, Allen, you got Ziggy Hood. They brought in Terrell McLean up front. They have Stacey McGee. I think Phil Taylor is a guy who needs to be watched, a guy who I believe is definitely going to be have an impact on this defense. That's guys being in position where they are playing best is what's going to make this team advance forward on that defense. And that's part of the reason why they switched coordinators and had to let Joe Barry go. Like I said, I use Marinelli as a prime example because when you looked at that roster last year on that defense, they did not have a plethora of talent. They didn't even have a plethora of depth. But it's how he schemed and used and played to the strength of the talent that he had on his team. And that's what great coaches do. That's what the good coaches do. And I thought Barry missed the mark on that last year. If that had been done, you may have seen slightly better results with the Redskins defense and wouldn't be talking about them missing the playoffs. They may have gotten a game or two and been able to solidly make the playoffs.
Right. Yep. Well, hopefully Redskins will get out of the proverbial hole that they've been in the NFC East for has been quite some time, and whether or not Kirk Cousins can turn himself into a more than a franchise tag quarterback, it remains to be seen. But Dujunnea, hey man, thank you so much. I appreciate you coming on the show. Tell everybody where they can find you.
Or you can find my work at theredskinswire.usatoday.com. You can follow me on Twitter at NotBland21. You can also hit me up via we have sportsjourney.com as well. And can't announce the show yet because we will be rebranding and coming back in June. So that will be announced later.
Well, sounds good. Ladies and gentlemen, Dujunnea Bland at NotBland21 covers the Redskins at Redskins Wire and Sports Journey. Look, thanks a lot, Dujunnea. Thanks, man, for your time. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Not a problem. Ladies and gentlemen, this has been Dujunnea Bland, Redskins Wire writer, commentator. Look at his great stuff. It's certainly worth a look if you're a Redskins fan. You want to know the ins, the outs. Dujunnea Bland has it for you at NotBland21. This is Rudy Reyes. I'm out of time, but make sure you tune in next week. Hopefully I'll have Mr. Sinbad himself joining the show, but stay tuned for that one. Anyway, this is Rudy Reyes on the Rude Dog Show at WBLZSports.com.